Sure, you guys could tell by the thumbnail, this next video is going to be cutting down a long wheelbase square body into a short wheelbase. We haven't went and picked up the truck yet because I wanted to wait for this kit to get in. It's about a 4-week lead time from Porterbuilt. Well, part number is SWBC 7387, which stands for short wheelbase conversion for 73 to 87. Let's get this thing cut open. Remember, don't get bloody. Cut towards your buddy. Boys at Porterbuilt are not trying to save the earth. They did a good job packaging this up. Their website has really good instructions with really clear color pictures, which is nice. So thanks for doing that, PBFab. You have to cut off the front leaf spring hanger. We've shown you that in a video on the F100 when we cut all the leaf spring mounts off. We cut like a plus sign and then hit it with an air hammer. You could also just grind the head of those off and hit them with a punch. These brackets are gonna bolt in place of those leaf spring hangers just as kind of a locator, and then you'll want to drill the 2 holes in the back and bolt them in place as well. Then that gives you these marks as what you're going to remove from your frame. So in front of the axle, you're going to take out 14 inches, which technically there's going to be another 6 inches removed to make a long bed, a short bed. Once you've cut this section out, you can actually bolt in this support brace, which is a super nice piece. The welding's really good. It's super heavy steel. I would argue that when you cut this frame down with this kit, it's probably stronger than it was from the factory. And then like a little support plate here, they've shamelessly put their logo on it. It goes on the outside of the frame, and you can through bolt it. I may end up plug welding this on the frame instead of drilling these holes through. I can't decide just yet. I think that would look pretty sick. So that's the kit. It's about 400 bucks, and it's got about a 4-week lead time. Now let's go get the truck. So I get over here, and my friend Doug has already got the truck loaded up on the trailer. As you can clearly see, this is his car hauler, but you've probably seen it on the channel a time or two. So this is it. It is in pretty decent condition. There's not a lot of the typical cab rust on this guy. I think it's an 84 Silverado. I love these throwback rims. But yeah, for what we're after, it's a nice little project. Truck's pretty clean as far as they go. It's dual tank, 2-wheel drive. This bed damage, but that's just going to become a trailer, so we're not stressing about that. Yeah, Silverado electric buttons and locks. No one's cut up the dash panel yet, so that's kind of helpful. Kind of a key place to look on these is in these rocker panels to not have the rust, because that's where they were bad to do so. And that's virtually nothing. That's just like seam sealer popped out. So good to go. The bottom of the doors usually are really, really rough. And this one just has a little bit back here. Again, not terrible for these type of trucks. A couple of months back, I found a short bed on a short bed frame that someone had made a trailer out of at some point. So I went and grabbed it, bought a set of trailer wheels and tires, and then took that bed off, set it on a cart, and then took the long bed off of this project, put it onto that frame, and just welded on some bracket extensions. Bought a 4-flat trailer wiring harness and wired it to the factory taillights to make kind of a nice trailer for someone. So I got that sold, which leads me to where we are right now, just pulling out everything out of our way and dropping the tanks before we can start cutting on this frame. So I took all the support out of the support brackets loose from this brake line, pulled the wiring harness out, and disconnected the parking brake cable at the bracket, kind of have it out of my way. And then I'll end up just cutting this brake line probably somewhat forward of where our cuts are, pinching that off, because you're gonna gain 14 inches of length. The tip I wanted to show you on dropping these fuel tanks, once you get to all the bolts, which there's 8 total, then there's like ground straps, which these are broken. Sending unit wire should be on each one for fuel level. You can get those loose. But once you do so, I'll put a floor jack underneath, And go ahead and drop the tank, which gives you some access to these fuel lines so you can move the clips out of your way. And I'll actually take a pair of pliers or channel locks, grab that hose if you can, and then you can hit the side of those pliers with a hammer. Comes off pretty easy. Now that both tanks are off and we've got everything cleaned and ready to go, I've got the thing on jack stands to support the rear portion of the frame. Also, I've taken the bolts out of these front leaf spring mounts, because the next step is taking these hangers off. All right, now that we got those sections cut out, these are the brackets that we looked at earlier. And I'm gonna probably clean this metal up, grind it back a little bit, and I'll bolt this in one side and then slide the rear frame over this half of it, and then we can bolt that together and then do a little welding. I thought it'd be easier if I just bolted one bracket to this side of the frame and that bracket to the other side. So technically you get to slide in from one side instead of having to be perfect. And once you get all 8 bolts on each side started and just kind of snugged up by hand, there's still just a little bit of flex, so you want to adjust your jack in the back until you can kind of run a straight edge along the frame rails top and bottom. Unfortunately, these frames don't have a lot of level surfaces, so all you can do is basically compare from about a few inches in front of the cab to just, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches from the cut, and make sure that those line up before you weld. Probably start with the bead here in the middle. Already did that side. Get this side tied together before we do top and bottom, so it can't really pull it up or down, because heat from welding tends to do that. And now that we've got it tied like that, we can go ahead and finish burning it in without fear of too much movement. Your welds are finished, and I did a bunch of cleaning up. You'll especially want to clean up this center section, because you're going to put this plate over the top and it needs to be flush behind there. I try not to build up too much weld in this middle section so I didn't have to clean too much off. And they set, I'll probably point out, nylock nuts as well as standard nuts. So I'm using the standard nuts when we did all the mocking up and the welding because of the heat it generates. And now I can replace all of those with these locking nuts and all the washers that they provided front and back. I probably could have put the washers on ahead of time, but I just really wanted the area to work for welding and grinding without a restricted space. Little Steel-It primer behind there. Before we start cutting on the back, we need to get our brake line put back together. You'll need some form of a union. You can buy like a female with both male ends at most part stores as well, but I find it cheaper to purchase the double female union separately. And then this little 8-inch kit that's got both the male ends on it, I think I have less than $5 for all of this. And here's your basic tools. Pipe cutter, that's for the range that you're gonna need, which again, the factory line is 1/4 inch. Then here's a flaring tool set. These aren't all that expensive, to be honest with you, and it goes from 3/16 to 1/2 inch, which will cover any kind of brake lines you ever do. And this is a bending tool that fits 3 different size brake lines. You may not need this for a project like that. Remember, if you just make gradual bends and don't ever cause any kind of collapse, you'll be fine. Oh, here's one thing to point out before you go to flaring your lines. Don't forget to put your fitting on there first. I don't know how many times I've probably done that and realized you can't put the fitting on over a flared end. Now that that's buttoned up, you just want to ensure that you have your brake line ran in a way that it's not making contact with anything with slight vibration, because any rubbing on this, it will wear through, and that's a dangerous situation to have a hole in a brake line. To cut the last roughly 6 inches off, they've given us this same width to hold up against the frame rail and mark it so you'll know how much to cut. I guess that's convenient. This is not rocket surgery, because if you cut this a little long or a little short, it doesn't really affect much. Here's a different take on how this is probably commonly done. There's already holes drilled the distance that we need this rear brace to be mounted. And I ground out around them a little bit, top and bottom. And instead of drilling out these rivets and air hammering them or whatever to get them completely clean, I'm just gonna drill these holes out to like a 7/16, which is just one size larger, which will allow these to just slide right up in place and be located. And then I can just put a tack weld on all those places. Probably be stronger, a lot faster. Once you get these frame rails cut off, don't throw them away immediately. If you're gonna run a bumper, it's nice to have these as sort of a scribe to know where to drill these bumper holes. I wanna use the one off of this side. You can kind of see where the bumper went in here and bolted to it. And I can lay it on the outside of this frame rail and scribe the holes that we need to bolt this bumper onto the frame. I took these measurements of the short bed, and that tells me where the bolt holes are supposed to be, which actually all you should need to do is drill a couple in the very back based on your measurements, because these factory holes will still be used here, here, and actually this one works out to be the 10.5 inches, or should, between these two for the short bed after cutting that section out. So that's kind of nice. Huge curls. Gotta come to me. There you go. Come on forward, son. Pick up and come forward. Pick up and come forward. There you go. that last tail light screw, we are finished with this thing. I do want to point out I didn't hook up the fuel tanks because they're going to have to come back down if anyone's going to do an LS swap or something and change those pumps. But it's as easy as cutting down that metal tube or just finding yourself a 90-degree hose to go from the door to the tank. That's finished. It looks so much better even if the paint doesn't match. At least it's red. Probably tripled the value of this thing by shortening the bed. I'd call this a good weekend project or maybe a full working day if you have a production shop with a lift and all your tools handy in order to get everything done. Definitely want a buddy or two to do the bed moving if you're by yourself. I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you've made it this far, click like, it doesn't cost you anything. And subscribe if you haven't already.